Can you begin to sense how that process works? And you can imagine, I did the Sri Ram, Jai Ram, JJ Ram with beads for about 5 years. I'd sleep with the beads, and when I'd wake up, I just wake up into a Ram, and then I go back to sleep, and it just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper until my faith in it got so strong, my connection to it so strong, that it started to serve to bring me out of situations I get caught in. Because the minute I started to recite it, I'd go back into the space of it. And it has its own space. Each mantra has its own space, its own vibrational space. You do the one on the bottom of the page, Auma Hong Vajra Guru Padme Siddhi Hong, Auma Hong Vajra Guru Padme Siddhi Hong. You do that for about 3 days, and you're like wired like into about 1,000 volts. It's a Hong mantra, a manifest mantra. So that is, and you now can work with Sri Ram if you choose. I mean, it's in deep enough so you could work with it. Okay? Now we're going to work with the energy in our bodies a little bit. So if you'd all stand up and find a little space around you, move around the room so there's a little space. And I'll tell the music when to begin. Where is the music guy? Outside? Can he hear me? Yeah, he can hear me. All right, I'll tell him when to start. Okay, if everybody's got, you got to have space so you can turn a little bit and you can move a little bit. So if you don't, there's space in the corner, there's space up here on the stage, there's space over on that side. Just use your space so that you can feel a little spaciousness. And just start by loosening up your body, just like you really... Just let go of all those little tight little places. Don't do violence with a big ego trip. Just slowly feel your way into them and let them go. And you might want to stretch to just feel your feet on the ground. Flex your knees a little bit. Just get your body softened up. Now, bring to mind a color that you are particularly attuned to at this moment. A specific color. Just think about that color. Think of the quality of that color. And let yourself start to be filled with that color. Okay. And now imagine that in your right hand, coming out of the palm of your hand, there is a paintbrush. As the Marines say, if you can change it, change it. If you can't, paint it. What a paint job you did. It's so easy in spiritual practice to forget the body, to get so into the bliss states, the emotional states, or the mind states that you forget the way in which the body serves as both an environment, a catalyst, and a leading edge. See, if you study yogas, you see that if you do, say, a hatha yoga in the sense of pranayama, breath control, and asanas, you will awaken energies that will pour through your body, up through your body. And as those energies pour up through the different centers of your body, you will feel release of different kinds of states of awareness, because each chakra is connected with a different level of a state of awareness. And when you get up into your heart, you'll feel waves of compassion and merging and so on. And there's great kind of wisdom up in the third eye and so on. So in that sense, you started with your body and mobilized the energy and directed it, and then in the course of it, your heart opens and your mind quiets and deepens. Or you could start out with meditation and quiet and deepen the mind, and as the mind gets quieter and deeper, the energies start to raise and the heart starts to open. Or you could start with the heart in a devotional practice, and if you do a devotional practice deeply enough and long enough, you will suddenly start to see how quiet your mind's gotten and how much energy is pouring through your body. So what I'm saying is you can lead with any one of these aspects, the heart, the mind, or the body, whatever is your natural proclivity. If Tai Chi is your natural form, it's a beautiful form, and if you get in deeper and deeper to it, it will mobilize the heart and the energies, and the mind as well. I'm going to do what I've been doing at every lecture, and so those of you that came here from one of my lectures will just have to bear with me. It's going to take about 3 minutes. Your patience. But if you've heard it before, just as I've said in my lectures, think of how many times I've heard it before. And I'm still happy to read it. I'm not bored, so what's your problem? This is a story I published in How Can I Help? It's a story by Terry Dobson, who died a few years ago. And Terry had studied aikido in Japan for many years. And a very evolved being, I thought. And I think it is my best teaching story. I think it's the story that captures the situation we find ourselves in now the best and gives you a model of how to respond. It's a lot for a teaching story. So use it metaphorically as well as just enjoy it as a story. The train clanked and rattled through the suburbs of Tokyo on a drowsy spring afternoon. Our car was comparatively empty, a few housewives with their kids in tow, some old folks going shopping. I gazed absently at the drab houses and dusty hedgerows. At one station, the doors opened and suddenly the afternoon quiet was shattered by a man bellowing violent, incomprehensible curses. The man staggered into our car. He wore laborer's clothing. He was big, drunk, and dirty. Screaming, he swung at a woman holding a baby. The blow sent her spinning into the laps of an elderly couple. It was a miracle that the baby was unharmed. Terrified, the couple jumped up and scrambled towards the other end of the car. The laborer aimed a kick at the retreating back of the old woman, but missed as she scuttled to safety. This so enraged the drunk that he grabbed the metal pole at the corner of the car, at the center of the car, and tried to wrench it out of its stanchion. I could see that one of his hands was cut and bleeding. The train lurched ahead, the passengers frozen with fear. I stood up. I was young then, some 20 years ago, and in pretty good shape. I'd been putting in a solid 8 hours of aikido training nearly every day for the past 3 years. I liked to throw and grapple. I thought I was tough. The trouble was, my martial skill was untested in actual combat. As students of aikido, we were not allowed to fight. Aikido, our teacher said again and again, is the art of reconciliation. Whoever has the mind to fight has broken his connection with the universe. If you try to dominate people, you're already defeated. We study how to resolve conflict, not how to start it. I listened to his words. I tried so hard. I even went so far as to cross the street to avoid the chimpara, the pinball people that hung around this railway station playing the pinball machine. My forbearance exalted me. I felt both tough and holy. In my heart, however, I wanted an absolutely legitimate opportunity whereby I might save the innocent by destroying the guilty. This is it, I said to myself as I got to my feet. People are in danger. If I don't do something fast, somebody will probably get hurt. Seeing me stand up, the drunk recognized a chance to focus his rage. Aha, he roared, a foreigner. You need a lesson in Japanese manners. I held on lightly to the commuter strap overhead and gave him a slow look of disgust and dismissal. I planned on taking this turkey apart, but he had to make the first move. I wanted him mad, so I pursed my lips and blew him an insolent kiss. All right, he hollered. You're going to get a lesson. He gathered himself for a rush at me. A fraction of a second before he could move, someone shouted, "Hey!" It was ear-splitting. I remember the strangely joyous, lilting quality of it, as though you and a friend had been searching diligently for something and he had suddenly stumbled upon it. Hey! I wheeled to my left, the drunk spun to his right. We both stared down at a little old Japanese man. He must have been well into his 70s. This tiny gentleman sitting there immaculate in his kimono. He took no notice of me, but he beamed delightedly at the laborer as though he had a most important, most welcome secret to share. Come here, the old man said in an easy vernacular, beckoning to the drunk. Come here and talk with me. He waved his hand lightly. The big man followed as if on a string. He planted his feet belligerently in front of the old gentleman and roared above the clacking wheels, "Why the hell should I talk to you?" The drunk now had his back to me. If his elbow moved so much as a millimeter, I'd drop him in his socks. The old man continued to beam at the laborer. "What you been drinking?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with interest. "I've been drinking sake," the laborer bellowed back, "and it's none of your business." Flecks of spittle spattered the old man. "Oh, that's wonderful," the old man said, "absolutely wonderful. You see, I love sake too. Every evening, me and my wife, she's 76, you know, we take our little bottle of sake and we go out and we sit on our old wooden bench and we look to see, we watch the sunset and we look to see how our persimmon tree has been doing. I've been very concerned about that persimmon tree when you consider how severe the winter was last year. But our persimmon tree has done better than you expect, especially when you consider the poor quality of the soil. It's gratifying, and we go out there even when it rains." He looked up at the laborer, his eyes twinkling. As he struggled to follow the old man's conversation, the drunk's face began to soften. His fists slowly unclenched. "Yeah," he said, "I love persimmons too." His voice trailed off. "Yes," the old man said, smiling, "and I'm sure you have a wonderful wife." "No," replied the laborer. "My wife died." Very gently, swaying with the motion of the train, the big man began to sob. "I don't got no wife. I don't got no job. I don't got no home. I'm so ashamed of myself." Tears rolled down his cheeks. A spasm of despair rippled through his body. And there I was, standing there in my well-scrubbed youthful innocence, my make this world safe for democracy righteousness. I suddenly felt dirtier than he was. Then the train arrived at my stop. As the doors opened, I heard the old man cluck sympathetically. My, he said, that is a difficult predicament indeed. Sit down here and tell me about it. I turned my head for one last look. The laborer was sprawled on the seat, his head in the old man's lap. The old man was softly stroking the filthy, matted hair. As the train pulled away, I sat down on a bench. What I had wanted to do with muscle had been accomplished with kind words. I had just seen aikido tried in combat, and the essence of it was love. You and I are living on the subway car. The subway car is all of the suffering that is apparent to all of us. The suffering in inner cities, the suffering in violent families, the suffering in Bosnia, the suffering in Serbia, the suffering of the Romanian children, the suffering of the middle class who get what they thought they wanted and don't want it, the suffering, the suffering, the suffering. We are living in a time when there is ecological imminence, when we are unsure about whether our ecological system can support us, can sustain us any longer, because we've so misused it. We are living with a population predicament that in 40 years the population of the earth will double again. And yet at the same time we are doing things like losing 4 tons of topsoil per person per year. There are 1,000 ways I could list for you that you and I are living on that subway car. An African American boy between the year of 18 and 25 living in inner cities is more likely to die of a bullet wound than had he been on the front lines in Vietnam. Today, 46,000 people died of malnutrition, and tomorrow another 46,000 will die. And in this year, 15 million of us will die from malnutrition, which has to do with the poor distribution of food, which has to do with money. And yet we manage as a species to spend $1 trillion or $2 million a minute for arms, for military arms. I can go on telling you why we're living on that subway car. And the question you and I must ask, if we are indeed using a retreat like this, a workshop, and our lives in a way to awaken and deepen our compassion, our wisdom, our emptiness, our joy, our equanimity, is what part we have to play on the subway car. Think of the old man in the kimono. He was so equanimous, he was so rooted in his being, that while everybody else, including my friend Terry, got reactive to the situation, he stayed equanimous listening, and out of his being came the response, "Hey!" which started a process of moving the whole thing into something else. It wasn't like you can sense in the spontaneity of the man that he's not sitting there thinking, now I'll yell, hey, and then that will change that. I don't think he did it that way. He was the hay. As Gandhi said, my life is my message. He had worked on himself and become such an equanimous master that out of him came that which healed that entire subway car dilemma. That's what you and I are called upon to do. We are called upon as citizens in a nation state, as members of a biotic community, as parts of an as parts of a cosmic system, of a world government system. We are called upon to bring into the arena those qualities in our own hearts and beings of quietness, of equanimity, of open-heartedness, of presence, of ability to hear the situation, hear what is. Now, we are going to do an exercise. It's a good day. There's a lot going on. I never know. Are you all right? You're awfully quiet. Are you? Let me do 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll go into our exercise, because the exercise follows from this story and everything. But let me do 5 minutes of questions. Yes. Questions? Yeah. Just loud. Go ahead. Yeah. It's interesting that I end up in Texas when the Waco issue is so much on people's minds, in the nation, by the way, but uniquely in Texas also. And so I've been asked every night about how I perceive the Waco situation. Well, I think you can see that it is a drama of sufficient proportion to face the country with a profound moral examination, self-examination. And I think that's a very healthy thing. I think it's very painful that it happened, but I think it is a very healthy stimulus to people examining. It's like the Rodney King thing also, about what is the use of violence to control situations, what do you decide as what is bearable in a society, what isn't bearable in a society. It's very easy to take sides in that issue. And the predicament is that you've got to find the quietness in yourself to appreciate with some compassion everybody's predicament first, before you can even hear the thing. In other words, if you say, well, these poor cultists were really just holding on to a belief, and why was everybody coming down? And those bad tobacco and alcohol people, you don't hear. You just hear that which supports your cause, actually. Oh, there were only 10 bullets in their heads. On the other hand, if you do it the other way, well, if a cult develops so much paranoia that it has to build up so much military hardware, it's the military hardware that provokes the situation, because the government doesn't allow that kind of, and it has nothing to do with the religious beliefs, it's just the military hardware that's doing it. And then you say, well, it's right that we don't really allow citizens to amass the kind of military hardware that could really do damage to large numbers of people. That's sort of beyond our moral level. And this is why they had to do that. And if David hadn't gotten paranoid, this wouldn't have happened. I mean, that's the other side of the thing. My sense is that there was an interesting moment I had. This is a free association, but it's useful, I think. I was at a Benedictine monastery, and I went there to sit for a while. Brother David Stendelrast was a monk there at that time. This was many years ago. And the abbot was a man named Father Damasius, who was a very small, roly-poly, red-cheeked German scholar, Benedictine. Should have been a Jesuit, I guess, but he was a Benedictine. And he called me into his study after supper, closed the door, and he came up to me. He sort of whispered. He took both my arms. He whispered. He said, Ram Dass, I only have one question for you. He said, what was the meaning of the kiss between Judas and Jesus? Good one. It's a really good question, you know. And I went out as far as I could, and I said, well, I assume it was the one playing two parts, and they were appreciating the dance that they were living out for the benefit of all beings. Somebody had to be Judas, somebody had to be Jesus, everybody had to play their part. So, see, I have those kind of levels to play with also. I don't think that David Koresh and the head of the tobacco thing got together and said, let's live this out for the benefit of all beings. But I can see exactly when if I now, with hindsight, were the government, I wouldn't have made the initial attack, obviously. Nobody would have. All you got to do is put barbed wire around there and forget about it for a year until everybody starves to death. I mean, it's the same thing as doing this thing we want to do that we're trying to do in Bosnia. And then we just get impatient because we're such doers. We got to do something about everything. Because we've spent so much money surrounding the compound, we're getting more and more embarrassed, so we got to do something. It's all ego in the way it's going. David Koresh was a person who, and I have dealt with a number of those people who go into an altered state of consciousness where they see very clearly, but the one limit is that they think that they have a unique position, and it's called messianic. It's a messianic position. I had this, interestingly enough, with my brother. I have a brother who thought he was the Christ, which for a Jewish family is no bargain, but and as the Christ, things were he had to steal cars because Christ needed them, and I mean numbers of things like that. So at one point he was put in a mental hospital. He went into many mental hospitals, and he was only allowed to be seen by anybody when the psychiatrist was present. So I came to see my brother when the psychiatrist was present, and it was a great scene because my brother, who was he's a lawyer, he's made millions several times, he's a great musician, he's a superb sociopath. I mean, he's a wonderful con man. He's standing there in a blue suit and tie to meet me in the hospital. I have come from India. I have a long beard, I'm wearing a potato sack, I'm barefoot, and I've got beads, see? And there's the psychiatrist wearing a white coat with his clipboard. We're all in our various identities, you know. So it's a fascinating moment. So Leonard and I are getting way out there together. We're out with God and the Spirit, and I mean, he's fun. His mind is way out there. And he and I began to wonder whether the psychiatrist would ever know that the psychiatrist was God. The psychiatrist was just writing away. He didn't want to look up. He didn't want to be any part of this whole thing, you know. So at one point, my brother said, I don't understand. He said, look at you. He said, look at you. And he said, look at me. He said, I'm an upright citizen here. In a few minutes, they're going to unlock the door and let you out, and they're going to keep me here. He says, does that make sense to you? And on the face value, I agree with him. You know, I mean, it looked pretty weird to me. And I said to him, well, tell me, are you Christ? He said, yes. Yes. He did that. Yes. I said, well, I am too. And he said, no, you don't understand. I said, that's why they're locking you up. That's why they're locking you up. Now, if you can apply that one across this situation, you can see that that messianic trip, which fits into the Christian tradition as the false prophet, is a big no-no in the society because it's very threatening. So you can see all these forces at work, you know. And I just feel that it's painful, and it is one that stretches you to have compassion for the human condition, because you see how everybody got lost in their game. Okay? We're just going to take one more question, then we're going to do the exercise. Yeah. Thoughts on free will. Do we have free will or not? Do you think you have free will? I mean, think about it. Do you think you have free will? I would say that I could answer your question on a variety of different planes of reality. I would say within the plane of reality that you and I are meeting here, and only within that plane, you and I think we have free will. All right? From another plane, anything you could do, if I could stand back far enough and I had a good enough computer, I could predict it. And had enough control of all the variables, or enough knowledge of all the variables. Like, I've watched an interesting thing. I took care of my father for about 10 years while he was getting old and dying. And I began, since I sat so long next to the toilet and around here, and, you know, I got aware of his body and his hands and his movement and his feet. And now it's amazing how aware I am of how I move my hand in a certain way that's his movement, genetically or environmentally learned or something. So when I go like this, which seems to me like an act of free will, if you knew enough about me, you could predict that I do this. That's what's so far out about. Not just about me, but of all the circumstances. In other words, there is a plane of consciousness in which everything is lawfully related to everything else. Forms are within it's not law like human mind law, it's law like the Tao Te Ching, the way of things. And there is a way in which all forms relate to one another. And those forms include your own thoughts. So on that plane, your thought you have free will is not a free thought. Okay, it's you've been had. So the thought there's a plane you think you have free will, then there's another plane where that thought isn't free and none of the others are either. And then there is that part of you, or that not part of you, whatever you want to call it, that is not in form, that is beyond form. Even these words don't work, but beyond form. And since only form is within law, formless is free. So you are free. And all the form, including you, is your free will. But who you think you are doesn't have any, although it thinks it does. Do you see the three levels there? I think I do. God, I don't. Ah, yes, I do. You know, it's a... Okay, exercise time. Part of what I want to transmit to you is, besides quieting the mind and opening the heart, in terms of the relationship out in the world, I want to develop and get you focused on the capacity of listening, of actually hearing without listening so much, hearing without listening, of tuning and opening to and listening into, because you feel something's going to be called upon from you. So in this exercise, nothing is going to be called upon from you. As a listener, we are going to form into groups of 6. Now, it's going to be very simple when the time comes, and I'm going to ask you to be in a group without people you know, if possible. And then everybody's going to circle around. Once you get your group of 6, just take a few chairs and sit around, or sit on the floor as a group of 6 or something. And then whoever has the biggest watch becomes the timekeeper. And then someone will start, and it doesn't matter if someone wants to start or if somebody figures out, they say, I'll start. And then after you start, go around the circle clockwise. And each person will have 5 minutes. Now, how will you use that 5 minutes as you all start to get nervous? You will use it, think of the subway car and the man in the kimono. You will use it to explore aloud one of the edges you're working with, one of the places that you get stuck in the subway car. Could be in your life, in some political, social, something or other. So you'll describe how you get stuck, what it's like, or what's caught you. It might be the loss of somebody, whatever it is, what's caught you. And then, this is not a downbeat exercise. Include in the 5 minutes some strategy you're thinking about or are using to extricate yourself from being trapped by that, like the anger thing that was raised before. If your anger is your problem, what are you doing about it? How are you working with it? What are you doing? So that you have in the 5 minutes to talk about a thing that catches you and then a process you're working with. If that only takes 30 seconds, the other 4.5 minutes will be silent. You will have 5 minutes to use. You may use them silently or in words. I suggest you use them in words because it'll be more interesting to everybody else. Now, all the rest of you, the other 5 of you, are listening. Listening in a very open way, but you are not making responses. When one person finishes, the next person starts. Nobody says, oh, isn't that too bad? Or, I had something like that. Or, have you thought about doing that? None of that. So you're not going to give each other support, okay? So therapists, beware. I know you're used to looking and nodding and assuring, but just be there. Be more fully there than that. Just be there and listen and tune. And so that when you're telling it, feel what it's like telling it to people that are really listening. And if you're listening, really listen without feeling you have to say anything. At the end of the exercise, there is 10 minutes for everybody to be wise with each other, okay? So then you can say the things you couldn't say before, all right? Okay, did you find that exercise interesting? Did you notice anything new for you in it? If you could you let me have a few examples and that'll suffice. Anything interesting in that exercise? Yes. The awareness that so many people are dealing with the same problem or some level of the same problem. What else did you notice? She saw the way in which listening was a meditative practice. The way coming back into the listening and coming back into the listening. As your mind wanders off and you come back into the listening and come back into the listening. Who else? Yeah. See, you seem to want to give advice. Yeah, you can see what an addiction it is to giving advice. You really begin to hear yourself. Excuse me, I can't hear you. Yeah. Introverts became extroverts People that couldn't possibly fill the time ended up using it all up, and everyone else's. Yes. Yes, you had your hand up? Reg, yeah. How long 5 minutes is? Yeah, yeah. How long 5 minutes is? Yes. He said it's so nice to sit down and share with other human beings, and he realizes how much he needs it and how rarely he does it. Sir? Yeah. Tremendous amount of processing going on of the emotional body. Yes, I know, and it's real to people, isn't it? Yeah. Amazing how seductive our storylines are. You notice when you're telling your story how real it becomes? Maybe none of you do. I notice mine gets real. I really think I'm real when I'm telling my story. Yes. It was much easier to listen after her turn. Before her turn, you're planning what you're going to do and getting nervous and not listening to, not hearing a thing. It's amazing. You get to see how little you hear when you really have an exercise to just listen, don't you? It's disconcerting to talk when you're not getting any reinforcement. People assuring you it's all right for you to exist. Any more? Okay. Yeah. What'd you say? Like-mindedness and like experiences. I like that. Okay. We're going to, I think we can talk for just a few more minutes before we have to go into the next exercise. So, questions about anything I'd be happy to entertain. Yes. Grief and attachment as it relates to death. The relation of grief to attachment? Yeah. Well, the experience of grief is connected with a sense of loss of some thing or projection of your mind to which you have become attached. So grief is a product of attachment, because otherwise, once somebody dies, you wouldn't even remember they existed if there wasn't an attachment to the memory of them. So it is a sign of the attachment of the mind. The issue is that it's very, very human for people when they have touched a deep place with another human being to then get attached to the container through which they've felt that deep feeling, and then miss the container when the container isn't there anymore. So you can grieve for the form through which you felt love, say. And then when you quiet down after a long time and you finish a lot of that grieving, and you're really quiet inside, you find out that that quality that you had with that person is still present even though the form isn't, and you begin to see that love transcends death. And so watching that sequence, you see people going through the tremendous feeling of loss often when a partner or a child or a parent or somebody goes, or friend, and then you experience it might take a year or two, or however long it takes, before they can let go of that particular historical form of that living spirit. And then the minute they start to loosen that up, they start to feel it again. They come alive again, and they begin to realize, at first they feel like a betrayal to the person they love because they're not still grieving, and then they begin to experience a whole new quality of intimacy, if you will, beyond that form. And this is a sequence of stages that people go through who have touched another person in real love. If you haven't touched the person in love and you're just grieving, or grieving in the abstract, then it has to do with your own personality and a way of looking at the universe in which you're just grieving. And that's something to deal with psychologically, not in terms of the thing I was just talking about. Sir? What are my thoughts on dreaming? And these are going to be really quick answers that'll dissatisfy everybody. Thoughts on dreaming and lucid dreaming. These are planes of consciousness in which you exist, and you are processing and working through karma on those planes as well as this plane. And what comes across from one plane to another by whatever means you do, if it's useful, use it. If it's not useful, don't belabor it, is the way I would approach that. And in terms of lucid dreaming, I think that is a practice to help you start to cultivate the identity on other planes of existence, and as such it's useful. I think then the dreams are primarily astral and low causal, so ultimately you'd want to go beyond dreaming, but I think it's useful as a step ladder to get free of this plane. Okay? Sir? Prayer, communicating with God or with the divine. The dualism, the path of dualism, which is there's God and there's me, is a path that is very available to somebody who is working through their emotional heart to go into the deeper spirit. And so they can find a relation to the mystic body mainly in a devotional way, in a relational way, through projecting form into something. And then it's very hard to love emptiness or love the formless. So you project a form and you love that form. As that love and that prayer gets more and more intimate, the whole quality of it changes until you really see that prayer is a celebration of the deeper truth of the universe. And it's not asking for something so much as just, it's a whispered, it's like pillow talk. It's a way of being, it's a way of remembering that you're in a relational thing. And you do dualism until you merge, like with the Anandamayi Ma quotes. Her first one was dualism. She's always praying, talking, honoring. Then she gets to the point where she starts to merge. She says, I've always been the same. I've never changed. I've never been anything different. Then you go beyond dualism. So prayer is a vehicle to bring you into a more and more intimate relationship with the one of which you are a part. So, but it starts in dualistic, as if there's God and there's me. The thing that it often feeds is, there is wonderful God, there is little inadequate me. You know, there's a tendency to get into a mea culpa thing with prayer if you don't watch out. But prayer is a beautiful intimate dialogue with your deepest truth, really, in that form.
There's so much attention on emotional healing right now. Do you feel that is a thing that attracts your awareness is on that all the time rather than just chanting and purifying? Does that detract from you getting free if it's just coming up,
Uncontrollably? The thickness and depth of our psychodynamics cannot be underestimated or trivialized or ignored. That's the predicament. And yet, when we see what the spiritual journey is, we don't want to end up caught in it. And the question is, how much can you process it without being caught in it? Like if you were an abused child, how long do you want to be an abused child? Do you want to spend the whole life being an abused child? Or when can you let it go? And what do you have to go through to let it go? And you can either go through to let it go, a kind of therapeutic cathartic process, but another way is you cultivate another identity in which all of your personality is irrelevant, not just that, but all of it. And that's going directly out spiritually. These are different paths. I suggest that for most of us in our world at our time, that you see the interplay between spiritual practice and psychodynamics. And you will watch that when you do spiritual practices, it will force stuff to the surface. Like you sit down and meditate, you start to cry. To the extent you can stay mindful and witnessing, witness the crying. Instead of climbing into the crying, notice the crying. Keep cultivating a meditative stance to it. Sometimes in the course of meditation, stuff comes up that is so traumatic and grabs you so tight that you can't get back into your spiritual practices. It must be dealt with. Then you deal with it either with a therapist or in co-counseling or however you're going to deal with that stuff. And then after you've got some light on that, go back into your practice again. And if you're lucky, you've got a therapist who's also doing practice, so that they are helping you with at the level of personality without them being stuck at it. That's what's the optimum one. Okay, sir? His mother's 89. He'd like to help her with a transition, but he sees the futility of advice. How can he help? The offering is our being. What you can help is whatever work you've done on yourself regarding death, regarding the connecting with that part of yourself which is not dying and being born, so is not frightened. And then you bring into her presence that equanimity, that appreciation of process, that presence, that there for her. And unless she asks, you don't tell. You're just there. You're like a rock, or you're like a tree or a river. You're just present, and your love is present, and your awareness is present, and you're with her through her process. You cannot die another person's death. You don't have any moral right to die another person's death. You got to learn. You couldn't do it anyway, as you're pointing out. So the best thing to do is keep your quiet, empty, and be available to her on so many levels of consciousness, as many as you've cultivated, so that if she's going along and then she should go into a state, another state of consciousness, instead of you thinking she's out of her mind, you're there with her, because you're in all the places too. So she can move in and out and move in and out. And what I've had in the work I do with dying people is often meeting them in different planes of consciousness as they get closer to death, and staying with them through these places because of my emptiness. And I keep emptying and emptying and emptying and just being present and emptying and being present. Okay? Yes? What is my opinion now on psychedelics? Well, first of all, I'd be a terrible hypocrite if I didn't honor what they have done in my own spiritual development. What I needed them for then, a lot of the kind of ways of perceiving the universe are much more readily available in the culture now than they were then. So what was necessary then is somewhat anachronistic now. You don't quite need that to break through, because there's not as much to build up. I mean, I meet lots of kids now who are as far out as my consciousness is, and they've never taken anything, so that's obviously not necessary. Psychedelics have incredible potential in terms of therapy, in terms of mystical opening. They don't do the whole thing, but they sure have some value if the society knew how to use them properly. Our society does not have really appropriate rituals for psychedelics, so they're treated as drugs, and they're treated in the category of either you're sick or you take a drug, or you're bad and you take a drug. You want to escape and you take a drug. The use of them sacramentally is not really much extant in this culture, and it's just coming in again now, the research into the use of them therapeutically. which is coming in through 2 new grants from the government. So I would say that there's a potential use. The problem in this society for street use of it is that because it is illegal and there is such a negative feeling towards drugs in this country, and since the experience you have with a psychedelic is so dependent on setting as well as set, that to take it in a paranoid setting is tricky business. You've got to really know what you're doing or have some pretty strong guidance. Otherwise, you may well get caught in the paranoia. Okay? Yep. What are my thoughts on channeling? You mean somebody bringing somebody else through? Well, I don't know whether when, like I written prefaces for Emmanuel's books, and Emmanuel is channeled by Pat Rodegast, and Emmanuel is a groovy friend. He just doesn't have a body, you know, and it's always interesting to me to see how much prejudice people have. You know, they're not prejudiced now about color, but if you don't have a body, they really treat you like shit. It's amazing, and it's really, there are a lot of wise beings that don't have bodies, so... And there are a lot of jerks that don't have bodies, too. So just because somebody doesn't have a body, don't listen to them. Listen intuitively, because a loser here dies, then they're a loser there. So you don't listen necessarily. Yeah? Sex for profit, spiritually, is what you're talking about. Can you have the best of both worlds? Well, it's a tricky one, I'll tell you. It is not easy because sexual arousal in our culture is very much associated with our personalities, unfortunately, and therefore it gets associated with our desire systems and with gratifying our desire systems. And to the extent you're identified with a desire system, sexual or otherwise, it is divisive between you and other people at some level because you're in it for yourself. It is possible to enter into a relationship with another human being to become conscious through your relationship. That is a possibility. It takes incredible truth and slowing down and being present through the whole process so that you stay, it's like a triangle where you stay in the one even as you're dancing as two. And so that it is not divisive because you're not identified only with a partner, you're identified with both partners, and you're also separate. You are the one and you're the two, and you're the one and you're the two. And that process is incredible with another human being. It doesn't have to be sexual. It can be just in sharing consciousness. It's not sexual necessarily at all. That's just another pattern of it. But you can come into deeper and deeper truth of the oneness with another person. But it is hard because most people aren't ready to deal with that degree of surrender because they don't trust the other person. And you realize you're not surrendering to them anyway, you're really surrendering into truth, but it's very hard to do it with another person. It just takes a lot of delicacy and commitment, very powerful commitment. So many ways to hide. Commenting on having opinions and preferences. Well, obviously we have opinions and preferences, and we function by having opinions and preferences. And the only question is how much your awareness is identified with the opinion and the preference. That's the issue. It's the link right there. And I can have, like I have this shirt. I'm wearing this shirt. But it's just a shirt. I'm not identified. It's not me. It's just a shirt. And same way with an opinion. I can wear an opinion, but you can come along and say, I think that opinion's wrong. And you're not saying I'm wrong. You're not saying I'm bad. You're just saying the opinion is. An opinion is an action, and the important thing is to differentiate between the action and the awareness of the action. That break is important. How do you how do you break the identification to thought without becoming nihilistic or, what was that? Cynical or apathetic? Well, nihilism and cynicism are both thoughts. That's the first thing. So that you just substituted some thoughts for other thoughts. So if you're going to get rid of all thoughts, then you'd say, would I end up apathetic? And the question is, if you weren't thinking, would you do anything? So I say to people, okay, just rest in your awareness. Now what happens? Well, I'm not going to do anything. Okay. What are you going to not do? Well, I'm going to stay in bed. Okay. Now what? I got to go to the bathroom. Aha. See? So you go to the bathroom. Now don't think anything. Just go to the bathroom because it arose. Like a tree trees and a river rivers, you pee. I mean, it's just the same level. Now what? Well, I'm hungry. Well, the refrigerator's empty, so pretty soon you got a job. Don't think. Don't intend. Don't do anything. I'm not doing anything. I just need to eat, and you begin to see that the web of your karma determines actions out of it. And then as you get more and more subtle, as you get emptier and emptier, see, there's an interesting line that's I worked with it for years. It says, it's a Buddhist line, it says, out of emptiness arises compassion. That's a far out line. That the more empty you are, what happens is, as you empty of conceptual structures, your awareness starts to become expanded to embrace, it loses its time-space definition, and it starts to embrace all things. And at that point then, the suffering in the world, whose suffering is it anyway? Is it their suffering? Is it my suffering? Is it the suffering? And you find yourself that if you hurt, my heart, which is part of the whole system, responds and goes out, and all the time I'm sitting there doing nothing, not even thinking about it. And you begin to experience the kind of compassion that if this hand is stuck in something and this hand pulls it out, this hand doesn't turn to this hand and say thank you, because they're both identified with the bigger form of the body. So you begin to see that out of the emptiness comes the broader identity. Out of the broader identity comes compassionate action. But it's not coming out of I as a separate entity think I ought to do this thing. See, and a lot of people are afraid that if they give up their oughts, somehow they won't do anything. And my sense is, if they give up their oughts, they may indeed act in a way that truly relieves suffering. There's a possibility, but it's scary, because along the way, and you'll begin to see how deeply lurking is the sense of righteousness in people. I want to be good. Because you got to go beyond good to be free. It doesn't mean you got to be bad. It means you've got to go on beyond your attachment to good. That's what's so far out. Because as G. Manly Hall said, one who knows not that the Prince of Darkness is but the other face of the King of Light knows not me. You've got to go behind all the polarities to taste the one, so that then you can dance in the two of good and evil. Then you're good out of the one, not good out of fear of being bad, which is a whole different ball game of where you are in that plane. That's the shortcut answer. I hope it didn't drown you all. Yes? What was that? What was my idea of government? What? What should the United States do in Bosnia? I would assume that the United States, if it were a truly conscious, compassionate country, would do like Jimmy Carter did with the Arabs and the Israelis. Say, look, I want to spend some time of my administration helping you both, and I'd like to hear clearly from each of you and really hear my way in. There's an incredibly powerful, just as you listened to one another and felt listened to. A lot of the problem is people don't feel heard by the other guy. And I was interviewing a rabbi, and I said to him, if you were an Israeli, what would you say to an Arab? And he said, Oi gewalt, first. Then he said, before we can be together, we have to grieve with one another. We have to learn how to grieve with one another. And I would say I would want to create an environment where those two countries could grieve with one another, could express the pain and the anguish that they are experiencing until they each heard each other, and until I heard them, until they all felt heard, and then we would do something to work it out. But for us to do that, we would have to have no vested interest other than in bringing about peace. And that's not what we have, okay? So that's our work. That would be that's just one strategy.